I'm not as young as I used to be, which means I can't treat my body the way I once did. In fact, last year's medical checkup didn't turn out the best, so I decided I needed to change things up and start eating healthier. One of the ways I do that is by making smoothies. But smoothie shop prices can be pretty high, and making them at home always seemed like a pain. You gotta pull the blender out, find the right attachments, set everything up, and then cleaning everything is annoying, making it difficult to quickly whip up a breakfast smoothie in the morning. That's why I'm glad to tell you about the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Like I said, it's portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita on the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. That's especially important to me because I wake up before the rest of my family, and once my kids are up, my morning work routine is pretty much shot to hell. And best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. BlendJet 2 has over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, so if you don't like one design, there's definitely one that suits your personality. So what are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today. Be sure to use my promo code SuperCinemaPod12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of the BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use my code SuperCinemaPod12. That's SuperCinemaPod and the numbers 12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
When Sire moves us to the new world, we're gonna need names. I mean, 89Q12, it's not really a name. So, I would like my name to be Lila.
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 That's a pretty name, Lila.
Thank you.
I think my name shall be Teefs. Because although we all do have them, mine are definitely the most prominent.
Teeps.
Teefs.
Lila.
Teeps.
Me be called Floor because me is lying on floor.
You're lying on a floor, so your name is Floor?
Yes.
Floor.
What about you, friend?
Someday, I'm gonna make great machines that fly. And me and my friends are gonna go flying together into the forever and beautiful sky. Lila, and Teefs, and Floor, and me. Rocket.
Rocket.
It really is good to have friends.
Yeah.
I always forget.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles Podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine. Welcoming back one of my favorite returning guests, the Star Wars writing motherfucker himself, Mr. Adam Lance Garcia. How you doing today?
Always happy to be here, Perry. That's the best intro I've gotten in a very long time. The Star Wars writing motherfucker. That's actually what it says on my business card. That's what I have. I have to update that now. Just put it on my bios and on Twitter. And if I ever get Blue Sky, I'll just put that there. Yeah, perfect intro. Perfect. No notes.
I was thinking about, because we've had you on a bunch of times. There's no neat reason to reintroduce you to everybody, but I figured should find something a little bit more unique to say. I'm like, I should plug the fact that he's writing a Star Wars because I know that's what he loves so much. So,
well, yeah, it's what I love so much, but it's always interesting, especially you and I came up in this writing industry together, and I think it's weird. I mean, especially you and I are still doing this, and so many folks aren't. It's a weird dream come true. I cannot believe it happened.
Yeah. But today we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Still in theaters at the time we're recording. I'm actually pushing this episode ahead of a bunch of others that have already been recorded. So just fair warning before we get too deep in this episode, there will be spoilers in here. So if you have not seen the movie, if you have not seen this movie and you don't want to be spoiled, stop right now, go to the theater, watch the fucking movie. You will not regret it, and then come back and listen to us gush about it for the next hour or so.
Yeah.
But before we do that, what's going on? What anything that's interesting you lately? Anything grabbing your attention?
Well, I mean, right now I'm still working on my last, in quotations, Green Llama novel. That has been the bane of my existence and the pleasure of my existence for the last almost 6. Oh my god, I don't even know how many years at this point. Um, I'm in the final act. I'm actually in the final act for the first time in a very long time, but there's still so much to write. And before we were recording, I mentioned like this first draft's going to be like 600 pages long. I know it's going to be edited down. It's very timey-wimey. It's very weird. But I think it's coming together, and I'm really happy with the way it's coming together. But I'm at a point in my life where I'm just like, I think I would have obsessed about every single line as I went. And now I'm very much in a place of just get a draft done and you can perfect it later. So that's what's something that was like my week. Something that's been an MC related thing. This came out, I think, like last week? Yeah, last week or 2 weeks ago. Time has no meaning. It's an illusion. I did a video with Elizabeth Olsen in which she talked about WandaVision, and I'm still like thinking about that video, just where she's like, "Yeah, the writers of Multiverse of Madness didn't see WandaVision." And you're like, "Yep, I totally could tell." So it was an interesting thing. And what else am I doing? I don't know. I'm reading a lot of Star Wars. It's all research now, which is a cool thing to say. I'm playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor. That's a fun game. Yeah, I really want to play Zelda, but I have to finish the last Zelda before I play this Zelda. Yeah, those are the things that's going on in my life. Perry, what are you up to?
I am just busy as fuck. I've got 2 kids, so like and every time I want to sit down and play video games, it's just like I start up the PS4 because I haven't gotten the PS5 yet. Although I was looking at figuring out because found out all the stuff is backwards compatible, all the downloads and stuff. So I'm like, okay, so I could sell my PS4 because now they got the PS5s on sale for like $400 or so. So I'm like, maybe I could sell the PS4, get a decent amount of money for that, and then buy the PS5, and it's only going to cost me like half as much or something like that.
Yeah.
But I got all these games on PS4 that I still haven't played, and every time I start it up, it's like, you have to update your system. So it's like, all right, wait like 15, 20 minutes for it to update, and then after it updates, then it's my daughter comes in, she needs something, and it's like, so it's like, and then I've got half an hour to play, and then it's like waiting for updates and all this stuff, and it's like, okay, now I've got 10 minutes to play, and it's like these games now, they're just so big and sprawling. It's like I don't know what to do now. I don't have enough time to really get into this at all. So it's tough. I envy being able to have time to play video games.
I mean, I'm probably going to die alone and sad. So there's that. I mean, it's a trade. It is a trade off. I will say though, it's like it's funny because like I'm not the most avid gamer in the world, but like weirdly, it sounds weird to say, but like I've tried to like make the effort to sit down and play more video games, just because I'm like I have a PlayStation 5, I have a Switch. I'm always like they're there. I mean, the PlayStation 5 was mostly so I could have a 4K player with a 4K TV, because why not? But then it's like I have all these games, some that I've gotten for free for work because my day job is dumb. And they're just like, do you want to go play God of War? And I'm like, all right, I guess. That's a humble brag. Ignore me. And then like, but then like I want to play these games, and it's just like, I realize I'm very bad at video games. I'm really like I have like friends who like got the new Star Wars Jedi Survivor game, and they fucking beat it already. Like it came out 2 weeks ago. They played it in like 3 days. Like I don't know. I'm probably gonna be doing this for the next 6 months of my life. Like it's just, and it's like this is me like sitting there for like 2 hours at a time, being like, all right, I'm setting aside the time to play this video game. And just dying and dying and dying and dying. And my girlfriend's like, why don't I ever? I mentioned this to my girlfriend, and she's like, in the 11 years we've been together, she's like, I've never seen you play a video game. Because I'm like, if I'm going to choose to do something with you in the room, it's not going to play a video game. And so when she's a traveling nurse, so she comes home and I'm like, I want to sit in bed and read with you, or just watch a movie with you. I want to do something that's communal. But I could she's like, oh, but I could lay in like your lap sleeping while you play a video game. Like, but then I'll rage quit, and you don't want to see that.
My wife actually, she likes it because she bought a Switch, and she was really into it at first, and then she get lost it, and then she actually gave it to her nephew before I could finish Ultimate Alliance 3, unfortunately. And then she's like, yeah, I like video games. I like watching other people. She's like, I like watching you play video games, but I don't really get into it as much myself.
Yeah.
And I've got the VR stuff too, but I can't use it because every time I put it on, like I got Helena always wanted to play with the cords and everything, and just like I gotta wait until they get older, until they fall asleep, or unless my wife takes them out to her sister's place or something.
Yeah, I can't ever. I mean, it's weird because like there is. Like, I have friends who come over. I'm like, do you want to play the PlayStation 5 or something? Like, I want to watch you watch it. I'm like, that sounds like the most boring thing I've ever heard.
I don't get it.
No, and literally no offense to your wife, obviously, because
I'm the same exact way as you. Like, I see all these videos and people say like, oh yeah, I watch the playthroughs on YouTube, and I'm just like, why? I don't get it. I don't get it.
Like, I would understand if it's like how to like I would watch it to like, oh, how they did that, like because I'm stuck on a this one boss and I can't beat the boss. How do I defeat them? But like, yeah, I mean, again, like this is not disparaging in any way, because like I mean, Twitch is a massive growing community, and there are people who really legitimately get enjoyment out of watching people play video games. But for me, it's like someone saying it's like sports. It's like, I'm not a big sports fan. So it's like, they're like, I love watching sports. I'm like, I could do anything. I could do anything besides what I'd rather play the sport. I'd rather play the video game than watch the thing. I think that's like, I'd rather be if this thing is meant to be an active participation, I want to be an active participant. Again, this is not disparaging. This is just personal taste.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I can't. I do not understand.
Even the walkthrough videos, man, like whenever I get stuck on something in a game, I miss strategy guides. Like I miss when they would you just look it up online. It's like, here's how to do it. Okay, it takes me 5 seconds to read this. Instead, I got to find a video, scrub through the video. It's like, oh, here's this one part I need. All right.
Yeah.
It would have been so much faster. I could just.
Yeah. Now I just do like, I'm like, I finished this one game called Death Loop, which is really good. It's like a time loop game. And it's just like Death Loop, blank, 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 solve. And it's like, I get a little article. I'm like, okay, great. Okay, now I understand.
Yeah.
Like I'd just rather do it myself.
Same here.
This is not just not saying you're wrong for liking watching video games. I just don't understand you. Yeah. And you confuse me.
Same here. Yeah. I although on that note, I did because I had read the latest one of the Injustice to the third volume, and it was one of the many books on my Kindle that I have to make time to read. And after reading that, I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to give the game another try again. And it's just like that game. Just like I don't get how people can do all these combos and shit. Like, I don't get it. I can't do it. Yeah. I gave up on it.
I know. We're also, it's like the, like XYZ, like, they're like, I mean, yeah. And this is also like one of those things where I think it's a unique thing where I would almost be okay reading that story, and I'll watch the cinematics on that, than I would actually play the game, because I'm not a big, like, I want to have an immersive experience, like a fighting game. While those were like very big when you and I were growing up, and they still are, obviously, but like I don't get as invested in it as much as, because I'm not good at all the coding and the combinations. It's just very frustrating for me. So I'd rather watch the cinematics on Injustice, which probably like than I would actually play it. So that's where I'm a hypocrite. So there you go.
No, watching the cinematics is one thing, because Injustice, the tired trope of evil Superman aside, it's actually a pretty damn good story. Like that comic book that Tom Taylor
Yeah.
did. That was solid stuff. So
Because it's basically like he like the Joker kills Lois Lane by making Superman think like hypnotizing him sort of essentially, and then causing the destruction of Metropolis or something to that effect.
yeah,
And like Lois Lane's like pregnant with his child, and she's like he goes all batshit, and then they get the Batman from our universe to help like defeat the Superman of that universe, because like the heroes are divided, right?
they bring the Superman of our universe to go in and fight the Superman of their universe. Yeah, that's the plot of the first game. The comic is just everything that comes before that. It's like 5 years.
Gotcha.
It's like 5 years of what happens before the game, and the comic ends with just like they're gonna go get the Justice League of the other universe to bring them in to take care of things.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good read. Especially the first few. Like as it gets on it, you can see like, okay, you're kind of dragging this story out as long as you can now to really capitalize it. But especially those first few volumes, they're really solid. And Injustice 2, from what I started reading, because like I said, I just finished the third book. It's pretty solid too.
Nice. I'm so far behind the comics, man. I have to go. That just reminds me, I have to go to the comic store to pick up some comics, and I know they're there and they're sitting there and they're waiting for me, getting angry. So I think that's what's happening this week. Oh yeah, no, I'll just go on Wednesday. Fuck it. Okay, never mind.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into it. Let's talk about why we're here.
Jump into it.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Volume 3, because I do not want to talk about I need to go buy comics, and this is what the people are listening for. So what's Adam doing on Wednesday? Okay. So,
and by the time this comes out, Wednesday will be long past.
Yeah, no, they'll know I've gotten the comics.
They'll know you've gotten the comics. Yeah.
Let's talk about something that we all really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Before we dive too much in the movie, what's your history both with Guardians of the Galaxy? Because I know we've talked many times before. We came on to talk about the Suicide Squad, talked about Peacemaker. We know you're a James Gunn fan. What's your history with Guardians of the Galaxy? The concept?
I've loved it since day one. I had some initial frustration with it when it was basically like very similar to one of my favorite TV shows, Farscape. And James Gunn has said like, oh yeah, totally. Like he's actually come out like, yeah, I love Farscape. It's a total influence. And like he cast Ben Browder, the lead of Farscape, in the second one as one of the Sovereigns.
Ravagers? Oh, Sovereigns. Okay.
The Sovereign. He's the assistant in that. So like setting aside that, like my initial frustration, like I've loved every single installment of them. I love the first one. I love the second one. I had argued the second one's better than the first one, which I know I'm probably in the minority on that one.
Nope. I'm right here with you.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like the one film series that my girlfriend and I both like unequivocally love. And when it's like she loved the first one, but she like just is enamored by the second. And one of the weirder, more like I would sometimes tell like good and bad like pop culture news. Whenever she found out like something bad, she'd get really upset. She's like, "Why did you tell me? Don't tell me these things now. I'm sad." So I kept the story of what happened to James Gunn, where some alt-right trolls brought up some old Twitter threads of his where he was trying to be edgy and off color and got him fired. I kept that news from her for a very, very long time. So we're driving back from visiting my parents, and my girlfriend says, apropos of nothing, like, when am I getting Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? So I reach over and I turned off the radio, and I'm like, honey, we have to talk. And I told her what happened. She was really sad. And I mean, I think it's bullshit. I think the whole thing that happened with James Gunn in Volume, with him getting fired, was bullshit. Weirdly, I think it was the best thing that ever could have happened because of where he is now, all the things he's done, and then getting Volume 3 to still be the version that he wrote, the version of his vision, is just it's great. I love this series. I argue it is the best trilogy of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it also shows trilogy plus, because you have the holiday special and you have to sort of incorporate Infinity War and Endgame into that arc. But I think this trilogy plus, especially the things that are written and directed by James Gunn, are the best Marvel films, the best Marvel trilogy, and I think it both highlights all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's strengths while also highlighting all of the MCU's weaknesses, which we'll discuss more in detail. Things that you and I probably won't agree on, but we've talked about this in detail over the last God knows how long. So yeah, my history of the Guardians of the Galaxy is just unbridled love, and that we got the third volume, and that it is so goddamn beautiful and makes me so freaking happy.
What about the comics? Were you a reader of the
Not,
comics?
vaguely as kid, I remember like there's that one guy with the Captain America shield. I remember that.
Major Victory, yeah.
Major Victory, I remember that. And I remember like sort of Yondu, sort of the visuals of him, but like in terms of like specifics, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I just remember like having the comics and I remember the covers, but I don't remember ever reading the stories in any detail. And I think Major Victory or Captain Victory, I like that because I just like Captain America, and that's what I gravitated towards. But I really I would never say that I was a dedicated reader.
Yeah,
I would be lying if I said that.
I was aware of the Guardians in the comics when I was a kid because I had the 92 Marvel trading cards. My brother had a whole set he gave to me.
Who didn't?
And they had they had all the team cards, and one of them was the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I remembered them from that, and that was basically the most familiarity I had with them. And like you, I'm like, oh, that guy's got Captain America's shield. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then later finding out that he's actually there's this weird timey-wimey stuff where he in his past self he stopped him from going into this chamber type thing, and so then he becomes Justice in the New Warriors and the Avengers. It's the same guy.
I did not know that.
I
learned that today.
Yeah, same guy. And then in the early aughts, I think it was, when they did the Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning did the Guardians of the Galaxy series that spun out of Annihilation. I've never been a Cosmic Marvel guy. Like, I read Peter David's Captain Marvel and dug that, but that was probably like the most familiarity I ever had with anything Cosmic Marvel outside of whatever would pop up in Avengers or X-Men. So I was never a big Cosmic Marvel guy, but I thought the idea of Rocket Raccoon was pretty cool. And then I saw in when they relaunched Guardians of the Galaxy, and they had it was a modern day, because the original Guardians was in the future, and the modern day Guardians of the Galaxy, they had Rocket Raccoon in there, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. And I started reading. I'm like, this guy's really awesome. This guy is just what I thought he would be. He's really badass. And then when they said they're going to do the movie, at first I'm like, and they said it was going to be based on the Abnett and Lanning version. My first thought was, and I want to know what your take on when they first announced this too, because they just hit it big with Avengers, and they're like, and then Kevin Feige comes out and he's like, our next big team we're doing, and I'm just like, oh, here it comes. It's not going to be Fantastic Four. Is it going to be Defenders then? Because they got Doctor Strange, they got the Hulk. Is it going to be Defenders? And I'm a big Defenders guy. I'm like, it's probably going to be Defenders. And then he's like, Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, record scratch. What? I did not know. And then I saw the first concept art, and it was like, the five characters. You had Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, and Groot. And when I saw Rocket, I'm like, no way. They're not going to do Rocket Raccoon. Are you kidding me? This is just very early concept art. That's going to change. And then it came out, and I'm like, holy shit, they actually fucking did it. They gave us a gun-toting raccoon. I fucking love it. And they got Bradley Cooper, who was like a huge star at the time, to voice him. And I'm just like, what? This is insane. So I was totally on board for it right from the start. And everybody thought it was going to flop. That's what I loved at the time. Yeah. Like, everybody was like, this is going to be Marvel's first flop. And nope, complete opposite.
I remember, like, and I think you and I talked about this on Facebook at the time, but I remember very vividly the sort of dichotomy between DC, like, saying, like, well, we really can't do something like Martian Manhunter. That's too weird. And then Marvel's like, here's a fucking talking raccoon. and Tree.
I mean, no, this was back
And
when
I
DC
remember-
was afraid like Wonder Woman wouldn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I really like the again, I think that going back to my earlier statement, I think the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy shows like the best parts, and also by avoiding them, like the worst parts of the MCU, the best parts are like, let's just like, you know what, these are comic book movies, like let's make these characters like this. We have a talking raccoon, we'll just go for it. Just say yes to what is there. Say yes to like, oh, we have a talking tree. Let's just only says 3 words. I am Groot. We go 110% behind that. So I think that's like, to my mind, that's always the strongest aspect of the MCU, has always been just looking in the comics, distilling it down to what works about those comics, and being unapologetic about those comic book aspects. I mean, obviously there's a bit of that sort of Whedon thing that sort of became baked into it, of like kind of making fun of the comics in some ways, which is, I think has a bit of diminishing returns in some respects, but also at the same time, like, made it a little bit more palatable to more like regular fans. But I don't think that was ever the case in the Guardians films. Like, there's obviously a lot of humor and a lot of like making, fun of these characters, but it never felt like at expense of like winking and nudging at the audience. It's more like these characters reacting off of each other. So I think they did a really good job of, again, I think with the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is a good example of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe just yes-anding everything from the comics and being unapologetic about it. And I think by going full throttle on those basic concepts of a talking raccoon, a talking tree, like all these really weird things, it makes it stand out. But I also think it was what still, and I saw a review about this volume 3, but like why Guardians works so well in a way that, like, that you could debate about superhero fatigue. But I think what's interesting with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, it never feels like superhero stories. It feels like a space adventure story. That's like the fact that they lead with that it also happens to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a plus. And I think, again, I can go into more depth, but I think that also shows why it's the best, and also shows what the worst of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is, but I can talk about it. You know what? I'm here. Let me talk about it now. But basically, it's like what I think is interesting, and with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, in this one respect, is that it sets itself in the MCU in every single aspect. It uses Thanos. It uses the Ronan the Accuser. It ties
Infinity Stones works in.
Infinity Stones, exactly. It takes into account all the events of Infinity War and Endgame and Volume 3. It says it's set in the MCU, but you don't need to know anything about the MCU to enjoy this movie. The only things you need to really know about is like what happened to Gamora, which is like honestly that's like the one thing, and it's handled fairly well in Volume 3, but like everything else is just using the MCU as backdrop. And I think what has happened a lot to the MCU, and I think a lot of the trilogies, is that they became too reliant upon the MCU to tell a story. And I think that while I think in the short term that was very exciting, like I think with a big asterisk on Iron Man 3, which is another conversation, but you look at Captain America, the Captain America trilogy, the Spider-Man trilogy, the Thor now quadrilogy, and the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. You look at Spider-Man, Captain America, and Thor, for example. Let's use Captain America for example. Like the third film in the Captain America trilogy, while I really like Civil War, is an Avengers film. It is an Avengers film with like the spine of Captain America, right? But a lot of these story beats, a lot of the elements that you have to know about aren't in the Captain America movies. Like, who are these characters in relation to Captain America? You have to watch the Avengers films to sort of understand who these characters are. It really feels it's more of a 5-film series than it is a 3-film series. With Thor Ragnarok, as much fun as that is, we don't know who Hulk is outside, like in relation to Thor. If you only watch the first 2 movies, you watch 2 and 3, and like if someone just sat down, like here's the Thor trilogy, and you never see any of the Avengers films, who the fuck is Hulk? Like, and then Spider-Man No Way Home is, I think, again, a film I enjoy. I want to be very clear on this, is that a film, it has 90% of that film has nothing to do with Tom Holland and his villains and his spy. Like, yes, it's part of his journey, but like so many of the villains, the characters that come into that movie are from other versions of the franchise. You know, like completing arcs that if you just sat down and said to someone's like, here's the Spider-Man Homecoming trilogy. Like the first, even then, like who's Iron Man? It kind of works in the first one, but then like the second
then
one,
you got the death of Iron Man and everything like that. And
everything
and
like that.
Everything, yeah.
Where does anything like just by itself? It doesn't make any sense. And then the third film is just like all this stuff from the multiverse, which again I really enjoy, but I don't think that film does a good enough job of explaining who these characters are in relation to it. Versus like Spider-Verse. But then you look at the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, where it uses the MCU as a backdrop. And again, with the notable exception of Gamora, which I feel like Gunn was kind of forced to deal with. So much of the story, like you don't have to really watch Avengers Infinity War and Endgame to understand this narrative. Like you could, for the most part, just watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Volume 2, the Holiday Special, and Volume 3. And that story all works.
I mean, you could even leave out the holiday special too in some ways, because the only really big thing there is the fact that they bought Nowhere, and Mantis reveals that she's Peter's sister, and even that you could they mentioned that very quickly, right? And you could and if you've only watched 2 and then you go straight to 3, you'd be like, oh, okay, I guess that was something that was that I missed in the second one, or it came up after the fact, or something like that,
or it's implied by the second one. Right. So it's like, it's so, you know, I feel like and again, with the asterisks on Gamora, I feel like it's so refreshing to get an MCU trilogy that operates as a trilogy, that actually is self-contained in like, I'm gonna say like 80%. It is 80% self-contained, and that's really, 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 really nice. The fact that like, but then on top of it, the fact that like every single character in Volume 3 gets this beautiful arc that like it uses Rocket Raccoon as the emotional spine of the story. It's just, man, what a masterclass of storytelling. I mean, is it perfect? No, but I don't care. Like, almost like the flaws are like endearing in its way. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm ranting.
No, that I'm like 98% with you on most of that stuff. Like I got the one big thing is like the interconnectivity obviously doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you. I'm totally on board for all that, but at the same time, that is a very accurate point. I'd also quibble. I think Thor Ragnarok actually gives you enough of what you need to know about Hulk to watch it. So I'd quibble on that part, but otherwise your point's well taken. And yeah, if you do want that self-contained thing, you're right. Guardians of the Galaxy is the trilogy that does the best job of setting it in the MCU, making it clear it's set in the MCU, but at the same time not being beholden to the event of the MCU. In a way, it's in a way that Shazam did kind of the same thing with the DC stuff, right? It's clearly set in the DCEU, but it's not beholden to, or even the Suicide Squad, right? Clearly set in that universe, clearly a sequel to Suicide Squad. But if you didn't watch Suicide Squad, first off, congratulations, you're a better person than I am. You make better life decisions than me. But even still, you would not be lost. It gives you everything you need to know in both those movies. It fits into those universes without being without requiring you to do any additional homework on it. You're right, absolutely right on those points.
I don't disagree. Like, I don't dislike the interconnectivity. But I feel like I just, I guess maybe it's because so much of the MCU has become reliant upon that interconnectivity.
Mhm.
Um, that they've lost sight of being able to tell a standalone story. If you want to like, here's another good example: and Quantumania, another
Mhm.
trilogy that is a Kappa recently happened. Well, those first two films, I really enjoy because I love again. There's that small scale that uses the MCU as a backdrop, and that's a lot of fun. And then the third film, Quantumania, almost has nothing to do with the first two films, and
Mhm.
then is all about setting up a villain that we already met in another movie, in a TV show.
Mhm.
uh and it becomes less about this character and this journey and ending this story, and more about the next thing. So I think
Mhm.
that's more my point. I think it's like, I don't dislike the interconnectivity. I think when I go to say like it shows what isn't working necessarily for me with the MCU, is that I think a lot of the films today have forgotten how to tell standalone narratives.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that Gunn is really good at. I think, to your point, like the Suicide Squad, you don't need to see Man of Steel or Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad and the Justice League to understand anything that's happening in that narrative.
Mhm.
Um, in the same way that, like, you kind of don't even need to see the. I mean, it, like, the fact that Volume 3 works on its own as a standalone narrative uh is testament. I think it works so much better because you are invested in these
Mhm.
characters for 2 to 3 films, and that's a different conversation. But it's a standalone story. The story is, this character gets hurt, and these characters have to his friends have to go try and save him. And they save him, and in doing so, they save each other.
Mhm.
And I don't think really any MCU film has been really capable of doing that in a really long time. And
Mhm.
again, that's not necessarily a negative on internet connectivity. I think there's a lot of benefit to interconnectivity. As I say, as a Star Wars fan and a Star Wars writer, like, there is something to be said about like setting these stories in larger universes and using that universe to propel your story forward.
I would argue with on. I think Shang-Chi did a pretty good job of also doing that too. Like the third act problems aside, it wasn't, and the post credit scene obviously was very much tied to the MCU, but the rest of that movie, like, it had this tangential connection to Iron Man 3, but it wasn't as overly connected to it. Like the whole point about, even the biggest thing about that was the Trevor Slattery character, and that I
Yeah,
would kind of liken to being like the Gamora thing in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. If you know it, it
yeah.
it definitely helps it. If you don't know it, he's just a wacky side character that pops in.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but I mean, but also Shang-Chi, remember, that's like the first of the, like,
Yeah.
I feel like the first of every trilogy that they do, or series that they do, is relatively self-contained.
Hmm.
But then by the third, it just, like, it becomes a mess. And I think what's also really interesting is I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the only series that's written and directed by one person. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm sure there's been rewrites. I'm sure there's like some script doctors. There's always
Right.
is. But like, even though John Watts did all Spider-Man films, and even though Peyton Reed did all the Ant-Man films, um, they all had very different writers throughout.
Right.
And they had, I mean, and again, that's not, it's, Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy being one person writing and directing is very, very rare. Not even the original Star
Hmm.
Wars trilogy had the same writers. It
Right.
had like you know, so like like, understand, it's incredibly rare what happened,
Hmm.
but like, I think it's interesting, like with Thor, Iron Man, you had several different directors, Favreau for the first two, and Iron Man, and Shane Black. Tonal whiplash is someone I like. Iron Man 3, and but like, it's a very different movie
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
the first two films. Same thing happened with Thor. Like, you got three different directors, and Taika Waititi comes in, and like, it's a completely different movie
Mhm.
Than the previous movies. Like stylistically, like the same characters are there, yeah, but like it's a different where, with Guardians, like there's that singular voice
Mhm.
throughout. And I think it's also really refreshing that like all three films feel like a James Gunn movie in a
Mhm.
way that I don't really think I don't know what a John Watts movie looks like.
Mhm.
I don't really know what a Peyton Reed movie looks like, but I do know what a James Gunn movie looks like.
Mhm.
I know what a James Gunn movie feels like, and that's prevalent throughout.
I think it'll be interesting what happens when Black Panther 3 comes out, because I know you had issues with the Namor stuff in Wakanda Forever, but even that aside, it was still pretty self-contained to the Black Panther stuff. It didn't really address a whole lot of stuff that was happening in the larger MCU. Um, and even the first Black Panther, arguably had some of that because they had the stuff with Civil War and Claw and all that kind of stuff, but which kind of served as a more of a place setting for the first one. But so I think, and that too, it looks like it'll be the same director all throughout. So I think if anything's going to be a contender for having that same kind of self-contained feel, it'd probably be the Black Panther trilogy when we get to the third movie.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that
I-
plays out when they get there. I mean,
Yeah.
then they had Ironheart too, but again, she was introduced in Wakanda Forever. She wasn't brought in from something else.
I mean, look, I'm going to be biased. I really hope Ironheart is great. Like my former classmate is the showrunner on that, so I really want that to succeed. Shinaka Hodge is a really talented writer, and I really hope that works. Just like I really like I wanted What If to work because like I have an inherent bias. Ashley Bradley was the showrunner on that. So like it's like again like I it's always weird, especially now that like we're at a point in our lives where like I actually know the people who are doing this, like, and not just like, oh, I met them through work. Like I actually like have known these people for decades. So I do have some like inherent biases on some of these MCU films and projects, but like yeah, I worry that I worry that they're not seeing the forest for the trees, because there's so like the big event, the big thing with whatever's coming next, that they forget like to tell a story that means something, and that's why I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's like you could tell Gunn was saying something. I will not. I won't hesitate to say like I haven't had this in a long time. I was physically sobbing at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
I literally like I knew it was coming. I could feel it. But like I literally had my hand over my mouth, just crying hysterically and sobbing. I haven't had that experience in a Marvel film in a very like even when everyone fucking died in Infinity War, I didn't give a shit. But like in the Guardians of Volume 3, he goes to see his grandfather. I'm crying like a baby. Just sobbing, and then Drax is dancing and I'm still crying. It's just yeah, I haven't had anything like that in a very, very long time with the Marvel film or just a movie in general.
Yeah, so I was a little bit nervous going into this movie actually, because there's some early reviews that came out and said like, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 continues Marvel's Phase 4 problem or whatever. It was one of the articles. I just read the headline. I didn't read it because I didn't want any spoilers, but I haven't gone back to find it since. But so I saw that pop up on newsfeed somewhere, and then I had heard the soundtrack on Spotify, and like the first two soundtracks for 1 and 2, I'm just like, man, these are fucking bangers. Like especially the first one is just like got an amazing selection of songs, and the second one, the selection's not as good. But when I saw the movie, I'm just like, oh my god, this is amazing how he worked in this music into it.
Yeah,
and I listened to the soundtrack for this one, and yeah, there's some bangers on there, but I'm probably gonna. A lot of people are probably going to wonder what the hell is wrong with me, but I've never gotten the Radiohead appeal. So like when I heard the Radiohead song on there, I'm just like, and like some of the other ones. So it just didn't give me that same wow factor the other two had. So I was starting to get a little bit, I'm like, it's been a while since he worked on one of these, he's really into the DC stuff now. I'm like, maybe he's just kind of like, I wonder if he's kind of phoning it in on this one based on those early reviews. And then I went and saw it, and like, and I was nervous too, because my son woke up several times. He would only let me get like 4 hours of sleep the night before, and I'm going to see it first thing in the morning, and I'm just like, fuck, I hope I don't fall asleep. I was riveted the whole time. I was like right there on the edge of my seat, and just like not even my eyelids did not move once, and just like I was totally invested in it right from the start. Yeah, and now there were a few things, a few minor things that I had here. One thing is, I don't think this was the story Gunn originally had in mind, at least not completely, because, or I'm not sure, or exactly, because I'm not sure the Adam Warlock stuff, that it feels like it's left over from something else, or there was a different. I've got nothing to back this up, but my theory is that he introduced Adam Warlock at the end of Volume 2 in the anticipation that Adam Warlock was going to be a factor in the Infinity War and Endgame stuff. Because, and I do remember too, in Infinity War, there's that end scene where Thanos, he does the snap, and then he's in this, he's in the Soul Gem, basically, right? It's got this orange tint to it. He sees Gamora, and she asks him what it cost him, and he said everything and all that. And I'm just like, and at the end of Infinity War, I'm just like, and in comics, Adam Warlock's very connected to the Soul Gem. Like, oh, okay, so Adam Warlock's going to be connected to the Soul Gem. That's going to be how they... And then they did something completely different, which I'm fine with, but it was just... When we got to this movie, the Adam Warlock part of it felt... It didn't feel as integrated to the whole thing as everything else was.
I mean, I do wonder if that's the case. I mean, I'm sure there's like, I think broad strokes, like he has said that like this is what he intended. I know that I don't know if he I know there was a version where like Gamora was going to leave or die in Volume 2. Mm-hmm. That he was talked down from doing that. Because apparently Zoe Saldana wanted to leave, not from the role, but she's like, she had like signed on for a certain amount of films, and they convinced her and Gunn to keep her alive. So I went like, I mean, as with any story, I'm sure it evolved over time. I wouldn't be surprised if like Adam Warlock was supposed to be a part of the Infinity War, but they decided not to use him. I would not be surprised. I mean, the fact that like Thor joining the Guardians of the Galaxy, which again is something that I actually really liked. As like, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes Infinity War made was having him like interact with the Guardians and then like immediately leaving. I'm like, this is an interesting dynamic. Oh, we're just gonna ignore it. Okay. And then, but like then him saying like, yeah, there's no way I'm gonna have Thor in my movie. Like he's like this. He's not in there. So they had to write him out of in Thor: Love and Thunder. And again, it's always feels really weird because I think there is a really interesting dynamic with Thor in there, and I think I would have liked to have seen Thor be a part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but then I think I felt like that basically up until Thor: Love and Thunder, where I'm like, this is not what I wanted. You had something, but you're not you. And then seeing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I'm like, oh, this is thank God. Thank God he's not here. Like, I don't want him here. Like, he doesn't belong here.
I wonder how much of the Thor stuff being part of the Guardians came about during that period.
It was an edit.
Okay, yeah. So that makes
James
sense.
James kind of said like it wasn't a part of the initial plan that he was going to stay with the Guardians. It wasn't until were editing the movie together that decided to have him go off with the Guardians. Okay. Yeah, okay. But that goes into that larger conversation where, like, not sometimes. I mean,
like, even including Thor with the Guardians in the first place, I was wondering. What I was going to say is, I wonder how much of that came about during that period when Gunn was fired from Marvel, and how much they're like, okay, well, this way maybe we bring Thor and the Guardians together. Maybe we get Taika to do Guardians 3 or something like that, or something. Something I'm curious. That's something I'd be curious to see when the behind the scenes story gets completely told about all this.
Yeah, there's a book coming out written by Joanna Robinson, Dave Gonzalez, and the third person I can't remember, called MCU. That's all about like the behind the scenes story of it. And Joanna's an old colleague of mine. Dave is another old classmate. You know, they're really good reporters, and I think it's gonna probably shed some light on those things. I mean, I am curious about, like, you know, like, look, we know that Feige like as many issues I have with like the MC and Feige, like everything I've heard about Feige as a human being is like he is a really good guy.
Mhm.
Like he is, he doesn't drink, he doesn't swear, which is nuts. But like he is legitimately like he basically put like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 on ice so that way like he could get Gunn back.
Mhm.
He was like the biggest proponent of Gunn coming back. So I think it's, and again I think it also shows like everyone what I find really interesting. I was thinking about this today because I knew it was going to come on. That some of the most like divisive directors you could think of, from James Gunn to Ryan Johnson to Zack Snyder, everyone who works with them is like, I would work with that person in a second.
Mhm.
And like you have like these like fan base, like there's a video that I have coming out soon with Michael Shannon, and he was in Man of Steel, and that's going to be an interesting one because he's like, you know, he actually really likes Man of Steel. He talks about it very positively. And then he like how much he likes working with Zack Snyder. And then he's like, then he was in Knives Out, and he's like, how much he likes working with Ryan Johnson. It's going to divide the fandom. It's going to either divide the fandoms more, or they're going to be like, wow, we have so much in common. But like, yeah, I think like everyone liked working with James Gunn. And that's why they fought for him to come back. And I'm so glad they did, because again, I feel like we're talking about a lot of different things. But I feel like let's not lose out of the fact like this is just a really good fucking movie.
I do want to make one more point, and then I want to really dive into the movie discussion. But I do think it's funny that these right-wing trolls, they're like, let's destroy James Gunn. And
yes, I love this story. Yeah.
The only way that you get James Gunn running DC is by him getting fired from Marvel, and then DC being like, hey, you want to do a DC movie? And then he gets hired back by Marvel to finish up the Guardians trilogy, and then he gets in charge of running DC, and the Snyder cult's heads fucking explode. I love it.
I think it's really interesting, and I think it says I think I could be wrong. I'm wrong about many things, but I think it is a good it's indicative of the culture war and where things really stand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that like there are these people who took umbrage with things that, you know, were even Gunn apologized for before they became public again. That they tried to cancel something, and by in doing so actually show that no, you know, we rather this progressive voice be heard. And you know, you only made them stronger. I love the fact that like out of like the worst of all outcomes, like this is the best one. Like I because there was a version of this where he was supposed to be in charge of sort of the cosmic side of the universe. That was the plan. Before he got fired, he was going to do Volume 3, and then he was going to oversee the cosmic universe. And that would have been cool. But I feel, honestly, like this is the best outcome, where it's like, I get my Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy that I love and I will cherish, and it is perfect and is mine. And then I'm going to get a Superman movie directed and written by James Gunn. And everything I've heard about that movie sounds exciting, and everything about the DCU that he's creating sounds new and different, and legitimately like not trying to be the next Marvel, but trying to be its own thing. And just everything about everything we're getting is because the alt-right trolls, you know, fucked around and found out.
Yeah,
that's fucking great.
About this movie too, like there's one of the things that I thought that really spoke a lot to me personally was the Gamora and Quill storyline, because you know, I've been in that situation where so Gunn was given the situation
where your girlfriend died and came back from the dead, and then
no, not that situation. I'll explain,
because I was going to say
he's given this. Well, you know, I mean that's happened to some of us, you know. But he's given the situation where you know, Gamora dies, and then she comes back and she has no memory of her past, and you know, I went into this with the expectation that oh, well, maybe they'll find a way to give her memory back in some way, or because there's that whole thing with at the end of Endgame where he's searching for Gamora, right, and
Right.
on the screen, and then and the trailer. This is also one of the things that got me a little bit nervous about the trailer, because in that trailer there's that scene where he's talking with Gamora, and he's saying she comes back and she's a total dick, and then Gamora says, like, I don't know who you fell in love with, but it sounds more like Nebula. And then they're like, and then he gets kind of nervous around Nebula. It's like, no, 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 no. And he has that little look, and she's like, knock it off. And I'm just like, oh God, I hope Gunn is not going to force Nebula and Pete together. And at the beginning of Guardians 3, there's that little scene when she puts him to bed. I'm just like, oh God, I hope they're not going to do this. Fortunately, they didn't go down that route. But it was a concern of mine. And instead, what we got was this story that is a metaphor for falling out of love with someone, and this whole idea of how it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? And I've been in that situation. I've been married. I got married once before. We got divorced, and it ended fine. Like, it was not like some big acrimonious thing. It's not something where it's like, if we see each other, like, we're gonna freak out and lose our shit. And
Yeah.
like, when my kids were born, she sent me a message to congratulate me. And when her daughter got engaged, I sent her a message to congratulate her. And it's just like, it's fine. You can have a relationship end and be okay with it. And I thought,
Yeah.
where that addressing that and going through all Peter's emotions through all that, with all the anger and the depression, and I'm like, I think that was me. That was me like 5 years ago. And to see that play out on the big screen and then get to the point at the end where he's just like, yeah, you're not her, but you're not too bad yourself. Like, I'm just like, that's exactly what it is, right? It's not the same person you fell in love with, but it doesn't mean that they're a bad person now. I thought that was beautifully handled, beautifully executed.
I also think what's great about that story was just, and I saw someone say this, and I wish I remember who wrote it, but like, in the hands of a lesser writer or a lesser director, they would have gotten them back together. That they would have really, like, it would have been like, oh, it's like star-crossed lovers, they have to fall in love.
Right.
And I think that is,
or the opposite. It would have been, they would have still been very acrimonious towards each other the whole time too.
Yeah, and I feel like there was like a version of this where I wanted them to get together because I liked their relationship, especially in the first two stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's one of those. I think it shows how mature a writer Gunn is, where he, like, I don't know obviously when it was decided that Gamora was going to die and that it was going to be reset and all these different things. Whereas like here you have Gamora. She is Gamora, but she's an older version of Gamora. She doesn't have the memories.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think a younger writer would have been, or more novice or more less skilled writer would have like, well, they have to get back together because love conquers all.
Right.
And instead, he told a nuanced story, to your point, about like falling out of love. It is a lot more complex. It is a lot more, but it is says so much more about who Peter is and how he grows, and having them fall out of love, in quotes, like allowing him to go off and have like find out who he is outside of relationships, and then having her have her own sort of family, a newfound family, having all of that, it's such a clever choice. And then, but then still having Nebula, like, not be in a relationship, but like have Nebula have her own character growth. Like, I love the fact that she's the heavy in the first movie, and by the time she ends at the end of the third, she's like she's like, I'm going to give these children a life I never could have had. That is tremendous growth. And it is, I mean, again, it kind of cuts through with Avengers, and I think Infinity War and Endgame, and it helps that Gunn helped write those scenes. But it's such an interesting character arc. All the characters just have these amazing arcs, and it is so unparalleled that like you can actually see like all the characters in volume 1 being completely different places at the end of volume 3, and it all feel natural. I don't think and that's the thing, I really don't see that in other Marvel films in that way. I mean, you could sort of argue Iron Man kind of goes from like, I'm not going to sacrifice myself to I'm going to sacrifice myself. But it's that's like a flip of a coin sort of growth. Whereas I think the changes that they come to are gradual and they make sense. Like the fact that Drax dances at the end is such a beautiful choice because it's also like because it's like only fools dance. That's what he says in the first movie, right? Like I saw my wife and she was still, and
The
then
second
like
movie, yeah.
in the second movie, yeah. In this movie, it was like realizing like no, I want to be like I'm gonna do the one thing that I've always I lost, which was be a father, and then so he's gonna dance to make the kids happy.
And that's a
It's
through line
just
that we pick up on in that's a point that gets introduced in the first movie, and the way it ends in the first movie, right? There's that, and you think they're going down the comic book route where Drax is the
right.
destroyer, he wants to destroy Thanos for taking everything from him, and you think that's the route they're going to go on, and then in the second movie it starts to turn, and then you see the
Yeah.
relationship he has. Yeah, like that, and then when we get to the second movie, we see how he is with Mantis and that whole aspect. And when he says like you remind me of my daughter, and I'm just like, and I didn't see it then, but then when we get to the third movie and we see how he is with the kids there, and then at the end when Nebula voices it, she says, you're not a destroyer, you're a dad. I almost fucking lost it when I saw that. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the growth, right? He went from wanting revenge for losing that opportunity to be a dad, and then he gets to the point where he realizes what he really wants is to just keep being a dad, and that was beautifully told.
Yeah, and like even like the I already mentioned like him Quill returning to his grandfather, like him saying like why do I want to go back to Earth where like my mom died, and or just being dismissive of it in the first movie, to being like, oh, I need to find the family that I actually have, so I can figure out who I am. You have Mantis even being like, I've spent all my life doing what it is everyone else wants me to do. I need to figure out what it is that I want to do. And then you have Rocket Raccoon. Just, I mean, we can talk for hours about what they do with Rocket, but like him just basically pushing everyone away and understanding why he pushes everyone away, to then becoming someone who's like, I'm going to bring everyone in now. And then the I am Groot moment at the end is just. It's like it took me a surprise, like when he says "I love you guys," I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like, holy crap! Like and then I realized like, oh, because we understand him now, we're part of the family, and I love that. Like, just again, like I think there's so much thought and purpose put into every single frame. I was listening to a really good interview. It's like this guy David Chen, and it was on the Slash Film podcast. I don't know who the other person was, but they talked a lot about how it was actually two other people, and like I'm unfortunately can't remember their names, but you could really tell that there was so much thought put into the world building, the character arcs, in a way that I feel like a lot of the other MCU films haven't really done. And I think that's, we've talked about this before. I'm not sure if we've done it on the podcast or if we just talked about it offline. But again, to use sort of what happened with like WandaVision and Multiverse of Madness, where they don't necessarily like the left hand's not talking to the right hand. There's this whole storyline about Wanda doing this whole thing and learning and trying and growing, and then her doing the exact same storyline in Multiverse of Madness. So much of what Marvel has done recently has been redoing the stories that they're doing literally during production. A good example is She-Hulk. The penultimate episode was re-edited into the premiere episode during edit. There have been major plot lines that were changed in Falcon the Winter Soldier literally like whole plot lines completely excised during
Right.
production. Miss Marvel, a show that I again have some bias on, because my friend Ashley worked on it from What If and helped rewrite it, and also you can see my apartment in some of the aerial shots. I'm not saying which shot because I don't want you to find out where I live, but it takes place in Jersey City, and I live in Jersey City. So yeah, you could see my apartment. I am canon in Marvel. That's what I'm saying. But like that show was dramatically changed during the production.
Mm-hmm.
Dramatically changed during the production. And I think what is so nice, and like even like with Quantumania, like they were talking about Quantumania in relation with like it's just there's cool looking imagery and stuff in the background, very alien stuff. And that's fine, but you don't have this sort of sense of like, oh, there's a purpose for this. There's a reason why this is here. Whereas I think with everything that happens in Guardians of the Galaxy, let's just say Volume 3 for now, but like, the grown biological planet, that's such a fascinating decision. And the way it's designed, the way it's built, it's all so well thought out. Like all the locations are very deliberate. It's like even the hallway scene, like
that hallway scene was beautiful. That was beautifully shot, perfectly executed.
Yeah, and it's just like, but you get like a sense of like everything. It has its purpose. Everything has its meaning, and it's just it's so refreshing to have. This is true of like any franchise these days, but like to have someone behind the camera with such a singular voice and such a singular aspect that like it all builds upon each other to create something very special.
Yeah. One of the things too about all of that, and going back to what you said about Nebula, I thought it was really interesting how, because I'm not a big cosmic Marvel guy, so I didn't really care much about Nebula in the comics, and same thing with like a lot of these characters. Like I think the only ones that feel the most like they are in the comics are probably Rocket and Groot, but everyone else feels very different from what they are in the comic books. And normally I would, have some pushback on that and be like, oh, I prefer the comic. But the way Gunn does it and the way he executes these characters here, I vastly prefer these versions of it to the comic versions.
Yeah.
I mean, what he does with Nebula is he makes her such a brilliant, well-rounded character. It's all about like how she goes from, someone who's trying so desperately to get her father's approval because she just keeps losing and she keeps getting it. Like she's a battered child who just wants to be loved. And it just like that comes, how they pull that all together. And Karen Gillan is just like, there's so many MVPs of this franchise, but she's definitely one of them. Like,
yeah, I mean, like I was a Karen Gillan fan because of Doctor Who. Like I love her in general. I think she's great. And I have a not insignificant crush on her. But at the same time, like a lot of that is because of Doctor Who. But I think what's interesting, what I keep on thinking about with this film is how much I actually like Chris Pratt in this movie.
I was going to talk about the Chris Pratt thing. And I just want to get this out of the way first while it's in my head, but this is something that's been bugging me for a while, is I am so done with progressive Twitter's hate of Chris Pratt. It's okay. It's okay, baby. My daughter just knocked over.
It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. They're all plastic, baby. It's okay. They're not glass. But I am so done with the progressive Twitter's hatred of Chris Pratt. Like, I'm just like, and all of it seems very much like we have to find a reason to hate him. And it's just like, it seems like a lot of it just seems like it's reaching. He's a Christian guy who maybe has been to a church that maybe has said some stuff, but he's never done anything that I can see in his personal life. And it's just like, I just think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair, and I think my issue with Chris Pratt is, and the point I was trying to make is that, like, I think Chris Pratt is one of those actors that, in the hands of a really good director like James Gunn,
Mhm.
can actually do a lot with the material. He's a very funny guy. I love him in Parks and Rec. I think the Guardians of the Galaxy films has shown his like helped him kind of figure out his trademark, but also given him a lot of range.
Mhm.
And I think what's happened is with like the Colin Trevorrow of it all, with Jurassic World, and some of the other films he's done, you know, I feel like a lot of things I've seen him in haven't had the sort of nuance that he has in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
And I think it's what I keep on thinking about when it comes to Chris Pratt, even Karen Gillan again, who I think is great, but just the whole cast in general. It's like you have the right director with the right script, you can get a lot out of actors who, under lesser directors, lesser writers, will produce mediocre stuff. I think my biggest criticism of Chris Pratt is that outside of Parks and Rec and outside of Guardians of the Galaxy, he's been fine.
Mhm.
You know, I think he has banked himself as like, you know, I think there's always like there's always a sort of, here's our like handsome white guy who is the next big thing, and they just peter out instantly. There was Sam Worthington, as is the example I always go to. Like, he was going to be the next big thing. He was an Attack of the Titans or Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
Clash of the Titans, and then he was in the Terminator film, and now like I don't know what he's in. And I think Chris Pratt became sort of like the next big like action hero guy because of Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's proven to be successful in it. But I don't think there's any single film that he's done that matches the quality of his performance.
Yeah.
Like in Guardians. I think, yeah. And Gunn was saying this, like, you know, with the exception of Zoe Saldana, who is great in everything. You know, you think about like all the amazing movie that she's in, like she's in literally like every other version of like the best franchises. Like, I don't love Avatar by any stretch of the imagination, but she's in that movie. She's in the most successful series of all time. She's in Guardians of the Galaxy. She's in the Avengers movies, and she's also in like some really great Star Trek films. She's great. But then like
you know what, I know a lot of people don't care for it, but I thought she was actually really good in the Netflix's version of Rosemary's Baby too. If you ever saw that.
I haven't seen that, so I cannot comment. But
I thought it was actually pretty good. It's not. I mean, it's not the original, right? It's never going to be. But I thought it was actually a pretty interesting update of that story.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to take your word on it. But I also think, like, for example, like one of my favorite, like even Mantis is one of those where I think she would, again, in the wrong hands with the wrong casting, could have been really one note. You know, but and then you have like the guy, God, I can't remember his name at the moment. Who plays the High Evolutionary.
I was one. Yeah, I got to look up his name too. But yeah, keep going.
Yes. Because he's amazing in Peacemaker, and he's amazing in this, and even like just
so Chakudi, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Chakudi Iwuji.
Yeah, he's just phenomenal. It's just again, I think it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume, like again, even like Will Porter as Adam Warlock, where I think under the wrong director, I think that would have been really like his take on the character could have been really grating. But he's a lot of fun in this movie. Like, even though he's like, to your point earlier, it's like maybe he's a little he's kind of heavy and it's kind of a joke, and he's not really like integrated into the movie as much as he could have been. He is so much fun. He's so much fun in this movie because you have the right director and the right writer with the right talent.
Absolutely, yeah. And, you know, to that point as well, I mean, even Vin Diesel, right, who just says 3 lines, I'd argue that he gives stronger performances in these 3 movies just saying those 3 lines over and over again than he gives in all, 10 of the Fast and Furious movies.
I mean, as someone who has only seen, I think, 1.5 Fast and Furious movies, I saw the first one. I think I saw scenes from the second one on TV. I think I saw scenes from Volume 3, the third
Mhm.
one. I definitely saw Hobbs and Shaw for work.
Mhm.
And I have literally no desire to those movies look terrible to me. I
They're
look at those movies and
they are
I hate
they are unbelievably stupid, but also fun. At least up until like 9, I 9 I did not care for, because that was when they lost Dwayne Johnson, and once he was gone, they lost something with that too. But like 5, 6, 7, 8, they're stupid. They're incredibly fucking stupid, but they're dumb.
heard,
They're incredibly fun too.
I've heard that like the fifth one is where it gets like really good, but also that's like for me that's like that means I have to watch 3, 2.
Nope. I never watched. I never watched 3 and
4.
Nope.
Yeah,
I've only watched the first
I'm a
2.
completionist.
Never watched 3 and 4, and I've never lost once.
And but at the same time, I'm just like, again, I'm a completionist, so and just like I don't want to have to watch 5 movies to get to where it's good. And then it's always like the fifth one's amazing, and then like it becomes a series of diminishing returns again. And it's just like I don't got time for that. And it just like they were just, it's like, look, I fully support series evolving and changing over time. I think it's a fascinating and it's a very unique thing that with literature of both cinematic and televised and actual literature and comics, where you have to see things change dramatically. It doesn't always happen, but I think it's fascinating to see like you see the things start like I think it's the unintentional evolution that's always interesting. It starts here and then it becomes something really wacky, and like you have like a completely different cast, but like the show is going on for like 4 or 5 more years. Like that's fascinating. But like the evolution of the Fast and the Furious films just like confused the fuck out of me. It's just like, okay, they started with DVD players. Like, why are they in space? I don't understand. I don't want to understand. I don't want to understand.
I mean, honestly, for me, like I view that franchise and I say it starts with 5, because the other ones don't matter, and it's just like it's like it is like 5 is a reboot of the entire series, and it's just like, let's reboot this in the most coked out way possible, and it's stupid fun. It's ridiculous, but it is a lot of fun. I will give it that.
But yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the High Evolutionary, because I thought, Iwuji he was incredible in this. Like not a big High Evolutionary guy in the comics, but from what I know about the character, I thought he had done a pretty good job capturing him, and just like the way it was, and just like that ending with him, and where you find out why his face looks all stretched out, why he's got that RoboCop looking face. And then you see what Rocket had done to him, and they actually fucking showed it. I'm just like, oh, this is pretty damn awesome.
Yeah, I also like. I mean, I'm gonna double back, but like, we haven't talked about Lila, Teef, and Floor.
Yeah,
I mean and again, I think this is a large issue. Like the CGI in this movie is amazing. It looks, I mean, you can tell the gun put a lot of thought into the CGI and the performances, but like that storyline, I mean, it's coming. They're not going to make it because they're not in the story. But they do such a great job of making you care about them. It's heartbreaking. Like, I think I'm sadder. Like, I mean, I kind of knew Lila was going to die, but like the moment that Teef and Floor died, I'm like, oh, not them. Like they're the most innocent things in the entire world, and it showed how monstrous the High Evolutionary was. And it was just heartbreaking. Like, I mean, I got so invested in what I knew to be completely CGI characters, and in a way that I haven't felt invested in actual human beings. In the MCU in a very, very long time. And this is
what annoys me when people are always bad mouthing CGI, because I'm just like, it's yes, CGI can be used bad, but CGI in itself is not bad. And I think this movie proves that you can use CGI as a very effective tool to create very engaging characters. It's not that it has to be practical or nothing. Practical is fine. But it's not. They did such an amazing job with the CGI in this, and like I was weeping at that scene when Lila dies, and then when you see Teefs and Floor dead, and I right there with you. And Gunn is one of those directors who knows how to use CGI and how to use it effectively.
I think like there's Tav Vaziri, who is an ILM God, he works at ILM. I forget exactly what his job title is, but like so much of it is like what makes a story work, a CGI work is making sure that the shot design is there, like the composition is there, like it's all well thought out. And Gunn knows, like he's like, I'm going to have these CGI characters, so I'm going to plan for it. He's going to use that tool as effectively as possible.
Right.
And I think way too many directors, and Marvel in general, has relied on like, well, we can do anything in CGI, so let's do it.
Yeah.
So that's why, but they keep on changing their mind, and that's why you have less than stellar looking VFX. Whereas Gunn knows what he wants to use, and he's going to use it as effectively as possible. So he can shoot something that's completely on green screen. There's like some footage I saw of like Karen Gillan writing a thing, and it's a blue. She's on a blue screen on a blue thing, and like, but the finished product looks great. It looks seamless because he actually knew what he wanted. From that shot, and he didn't change his mind last minute. So it's it's just it's evidence of someone who knew what they wanted to do and what they wanted to say. And at every point, from the VFX to the actors to just the way the shots are framed, Gunn knew what he wanted to use his film to say.
Yeah, exactly. Also talking about, and then obviously talking about Rocket in this too. I mean, fairly recently, Gunn had said that Rocket's actually the main character of the series, not Quill. And I'd never thought about it that way, but then I was thinking about it going back. I'm like, actually, that does make a lot of sense if you look at this as Rocket's journey. And then I love that scene when he has that vision of Lila, and she says to him, You've been the main character all along. And
it's been your story all along.
I fucking lost it at that.
It's interesting because it's like it all tracks. Like I think you can sort of almost like, I would argue that they're co-protagonists. But I mean, obviously, but like, like there's a great scene in Volume 2 where Yondu is just like, because you're me, like it's just like when he's
love that scene.
I think that scene is funny as you look at that scene now, and he's like, you push everyone because like you're worried that it's like you get that hurt inside you that you'll feel it again. That is such a like it, now that you know what the hurt was, you're like, oh man, yep, that's a dead on thing. And again, that's just the cohesion of this trilogy.
And just Bradley Cooper. I mean, I love the fact that he was cast as Rocket to begin with. When they announced that he was going to be the voice, I'm like, because I didn't know, outside of Zoe Saldana and obviously Vin Diesel, I didn't know any of the actors. I hadn't been familiar with any of them when they announced the cast of the first Guardians. But when they announced Bradley Cooper as Rocket, I'm like, oh wow, that'll be interesting, because I dig Bradley Cooper. I've dug him in the Hangover stuff. I like the A-Team. I know a lot of people hate that movie, but I thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought he was great in that movie. I liked him in Limitless, and so many other stuff I've seen him in. So I'm just like, oh yeah, this is gonna be awesome. And then when I saw the movie, I could not recognize his voice at all. So much so that every time I watch one of these movies, I just double check. Wait, is it still Bradley Cooper doing that voice? Because it does not sound like him. And then
he did all the present day stuff. He did the young was the
That was
young Rocket. It was Sean Gunn, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
there was the child was someone else.
Okay. And yeah, and he knocked it out of the park. Like his performance in all these movies, and also in the Avengers movies, has just been. I mean, seriously, Rocket, hands down, my favorite character of the Guardians. He was
Yeah.
going into it, and he still remains my favorite of all of them. And just like the character growth, and when he goes into the animal pen at the end, and he sees the raccoon sign on it, and then
Yeah.
when he announces his name and he says, "I'm Rocket Raccoon," and I'm just like, fucking
Yeah.
finally. It's like, and I wasn't
Yeah.
against him like making fun of the fact that he's like, "Don't call me Raccoon." I thought it was a funny little joke because that's his name in the comics, but to see that at the end there, and we also see like even his love of music, we see where it comes from in this, because we're left thinking the entire time like, oh well, he got that from Peter, obviously, but then we see in this movie, it's like, no, he had this in him from the beginning, and it's just I'm running out of things to say. Like I'm getting speechless, but it was such a beautiful journey for that character. And I love too that this is something that I'd seen a lot of people and getting speculating about, and some people even after seeing it like being upset about the fact that no one dies. And I don't know about you, but I think the whole it's the last movie, we have to kill a bunch of character is the laziest fucking trope ever. It's so fucking
you say
stupid.
that as I've killed off a lot of characters in my.
I mean, I have too, but at the same point, when it's done just because it's the last one, it's so fucking lazy.
Yeah, it's because it's like I with the llama, like I do kill off a lot of characters, but I also, since I'm playing with time, I am bringing some back in different ways. So it's interesting, but like that's I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I could talk about it for a while. But I think what is really refreshing about Gunn's decision not to kill anyone off, again, it's that maturity. It's just I'm going to tell a story about these characters and having them grow and experience a kind of loss, a heartbreaking loss, which is like the loss of this family unit, this loss of this like this relationship, the loss of friends that help define you, and but still like come out of it like knowing like they're gonna be okay.
Right.
That was I felt that was such a braver choice than, like, oh, we're gonna kill off, Drax, because it was.
And he teased us. He teased us, right? Because with that scene with Quill at the end there, I'm just like, oh fuck, here it comes. We gotta have the. And it felt like I'm like, if they kill him off this way, it's gonna be so fucking lazy, and I hate this death scene. And then and I could argue like that scene felt a little bit forced when Warlock comes out of nowhere and saves him, but at the same time, I'm still glad I still prefer that than killing him off.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, also let's talk about the new team at the end that forms in the wake of this. Well, first of all, before that, one thing about Gamora too, because I know a lot of fans of Cosmic Marvel have said that Gamora, out of all the characters, like Gamora is probably the least like she is in the comics, and I can get that. But I think what was kind of funny here is by the end of it, it kind of feels like she's her comics counterpart now. She feels more like she is in the comics in this movie than she has before, because now she really does feel like the most dangerous woman in the galaxy.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with her on the comics, so I really can't comment on that. But I think with Gamora, it's again, I think it's a really clever choice she goes through significant growth in this movie where you could sort of see her go from this other version of Gamora to be someone that's similar to but distinct from the Gamora that we came to know and love. I mean, the fact that she can understand Groot at the end is indicative of that.
Yeah,
I think it is. But then she's still like, yes, I'm part of this family, but I have a family of my own. That is I don't know. I it's funny because like I talked to my girlfriend the morning after I saw it, and then I talked to her again a couple of days later. I'm like, I don't think I explained myself because she's a night nurse, so we talk in the morning. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, not only was I weeping, but it does all these things that are so unique and it makes sense. And I don't want to spoil anything to her, even though she doesn't care about spoilers, but I do. And I'm like, what they do with Peter and Gamora is not the story that I expected, but it's the right story to be told.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, I again, I can't speak to the comic version of it all, but I think it's a really clever choice to make her, you know, have this realization of what makes the Guardian so special, and allow her then to kind of move on to the next phase of her life. Because Zoe Saldana's done; she's not coming back.
Right.
Neither is Dave Bautista, who is just so good. Like Dave Bautista is like easily the best wrestler turned actor. Then it's John Cena.
Well, like we were talking about when we talked about Peacemaker. Like when we get a wrestler transitioning into actor, you might get lucky and it might be a Dwayne Johnson type where he's fun to watch, but doesn't have all that much range. But
yeah,
most of the time it's probably more like you're gonna get a Hulk Hogan. And then we get Dave Bautista and we get John Cena, and it's just like they're fucking incredible actors.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because like The Rock had range, and then he realized what was safe and what would get him money, and then he realized that he can't reshape the DC universe.
The balance of power did not shift,
but it did. That's the thing. Like
not in the way he intended, though.
It's hilarious. What a bad move on his part.
Yeah. I feel bad for Henry Cavill, though.
I mean, Henry Cavill, he'll be fine. I think it's I feel bad. He was used as a pawn in a game that like it was unfair. I feel like based on everything I'm hearing what Gunn wants to do with Superman Legacy, I think if Henry Cavill been cast, if Gunn had been in charge when Cavill was cast, we would get that movie with Cavill. But
you
know, it did it. I'm making expressions like anyone can see this on a podcast. You know, I think it was this. Just he was used as a pawn because The Rock and he have the same PR rep, and they're trying to get control of the DC universe, and did not work out.
Yeah. So, what do you think of the new team at the end? Like, I thought it was a smart choice for Rocket to finally be the leader of the team here, because that's the perfect end to his growth, right? Because he goes from this, like, even though he had Groot, he was still basically a loner, and then to like accepting that he's part of the family to now becoming the leader of the team. I thought was, perfect use of the perfect way to end on that character's note.
Yeah, and I also like that Adam Warlock's a member of the team, because that kind of, like, they even say like everyone deserves a second chance. That is we see that happen with Nebula, Gamora. Every character has Yondu, and so having him be a part of it, like, that felt right. It also was nice seeing Sean Gunn's character, whose name I'm blanking on right now.
Cosmo.
It's midnight.
No, Kraglin. Sorry, I was not
Kraglin.
Cosmo's
Kraglin, that was cute. Cosmo,
Yeah.
They never called me a bad dog.
I was so glad because we got the tease of Cosmo in the first movie, and then we didn't see her again, and then we saw her in, and then she popped up in a holiday special. I'm like, oh yes. And then when I'm going to the theater, I looked at the poster and they've got Cosmo on the poster. I'm like, Cosmo's going to be in this movie. Like, she didn't have a big role, but I love that she did have some role in it. And I do like that she's a member of the team now going forward. And also bringing in Phyla-Vell. I thought that was an interesting choice too.
Yeah, I have no idea who she is beyond this movie. So
she's Mar-Vell's daughter.
Okay. I think it's personally, I think it's like, it's just nice. I think it's a nice change. I think it's like
Mhm.
again, I like the fact that it's a very unique and distinct team.
Yeah, and we get still Rocket and Groot as like the core of the team. I like that too.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, what else I want to say about it? Oh, Nathan Fillion's role.
He's
He goddamn, he had me. I think he was probably the laugh out loudest part of this movie was me watching Nathan Fillion up until Drax throws the ball at the girl.
yeah. I also like he's like I've had one of those. It's just like I thought you meant something else. It's so good. Oh god, Nathan Fillion. What a guy.
And
I don't know.
I'm glad that he got a little bit bigger of a part because we had him in that small voice part in the first one, and then he's just the cameo of Simon Williams on the poster in the second one, and which now we know is going to be a different Simon Williams because we're getting a different guy playing him in the TV show. But I'm so glad we got to see a little bit of Nathan Fillion in this. That was so much fun for me. But yeah, I think that. What do you think about the ending with the legendary Star-Lord will return?
I mean, that kind of bummed me out because I think it was like I really like I liked the beat with him and his grandfather and this very mundane. Let's just like just drinking, like eating cereal and like slurping up the milk and just having like just like I'll go like just a very very mundane. Like I'll go and mow the lawn. It feels weird. I liked it a lot. The legendary Star-Lord return. It felt both ironic because of the context, but I think ultimately it did kind of bum me out where I just kind of wanted just to fade to black. I don't it was like the one I'm like, please don't tease me. I'm so happy right now. I'm not looking forward to the next thing. Like again, and I say this as someone who loves Doctor Who loves all these like ongoing things and Star Wars and things like that. But there's something to be said about endings. Like the things that I loved about like what I like about the sequel trilogy from Star Wars is like, oh, the characters like die or have like actual endings. That's really nice. I kind of want to see more of that. The universe can continue, but it's nice seeing these characters kind of, get their curtain call. And I think that was the thing that. So when it's like, oh, legendary Star-Lord, which I'm like, don't please just give a curtain call. Like he can show up later. Don't fucking. Stop it.
Because as far as I know, Chris Pratt hasn't said anything about coming back for any other movie. So I felt like that was done ironically.
I could see that.
Because obviously, this is Gunn's last film. He said he's not doing another Guardians film, and I don't see Pratt coming back to do another one without Gunn. So I feel like it was really intended to be ironic, which is why I thought it was funny. If anything, I think it'd be funny to do like, remember when they did the whole Team Thor stuff with him and with his Australian roommate? If we saw some of like, do some like, Disney Plus shorts or something like that with like Star-Lord doing mundane shit on Earth, I think would be funny.
That would be fun. Yeah. It's weird. Like as much as I want more stories with these characters, like I don't want more story. I like that. Again, I like that I have like this perfect little trilogy plus that I can hold in my arms, and it's like I was listening to like Kristen Ritter talk about the Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 the other day, and she's
that was such an amazing show.
It's such an amazing show. It's 2 seasons and never got bad. There's something to be said about shows that like just never got bad. They ended and it's heartbreaking, but they never got bad. They never like I think like I loved the CW, but like I can't remember the last time I watched The Flash. Like, and apparently it's ending now, but it's like season 10.
Yeah, it's season 9. Yeah. I haven't seen any of this season, but yeah, seasons 7 and 8 were a slog for me to get through.
I think I dropped off like season 4 or 5.
But anyway, now we're transitioning, and my daughter's getting fussy. She wants to go out, so we should probably close up here. But yeah, this movie was just so. The final thing I want to talk about, like obviously, I think we're both in agreement that probably the best trilogy of the MCU.
Yes.
I mean, I would argue. No, I think I'd probably say that yeah. Cap comes close to giving a run for its money, but it's really this one is consistently the best all throughout. I think definitely the most consistent trilogy. But of those three movies, do you have a favorite? The three Guardians films.
I really don't. I have to rewatch them. They sort of all sort of form like an amorphous blob in my mind, and I say that in the best way possible. I think it's maybe the first one's probably still the best, because I think it was such a breath of fresh air. No. What am I saying? Because I love the second volume more. They all kind of blurred in my mind, and I mean this in the best way possible, because I think the first one's a really great sort of introductory story, and it's all like this huge, massive, like what it felt like to watch the Star Wars for the first time, which is what Gunn wanted to do. What I really liked about the second one was, what if we, instead of trying to like up the stakes, what if we made something smaller and told us a really intimate story about this family? And there's a lot of heart in that movie, and I love that. Very cathartic at the end when Yondu dies. Beautiful. And then this one, I think, is that really interesting merger of the three, where you have a very heartfelt storyline about this found family, with literal, like, not galactic stakes, but like very large stakes kind of interweaved together. I think it's kind of, I don't know if I can say which one's my favorite yet. I would need to rewatch it, but also I think like as a trilogy, it's just increasing returns, and I'm just
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. I think, and again, I'd have to rewatch them to feel it. And it might just be that euphoric feeling after you watch a movie for the first time. So my personal thing is, after I watch a movie the first time, I usually have two gut reactions. It's either like, oh my God, that was amazing, or I didn't really like that much. It's very off. Yeah. And then I have to watch it again to kind of form a more, complete opinion of it. But this one at the moment, I think I'm kind of leaning towards this one. I can see it. And there's some bias in that with the personal aspects, how it relates to my own life. There's the bias of Rocket being my favorite character in it. So there's just so much in it I love. But at the same time too, like 2 was the one that was the last movie my dad and I saw in the theater together. So that's very important to me for that reason. And like to tie that in with the whole theme of fatherhood, it was just like the perfect, I can't think of a more perfect final movie I would have wanted to watch with my dad. So, But it's been consistently a good trilogy, and it's just like each movie finds a way to do something different, right? To something you had kind of mentioned earlier, right? The whole idea of like Iron Man going from this character journey being very selfish and then to becoming self-sacrificing. It's a character journey he goes on a few times in the MCU.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind that. Obviously you've got some thoughts on that, but what I think was really cool about this is that Gunn found a way to tell new stories with these characters while still keeping them true to those characters, and not new stories in like the Stan Lee illusion of change way, but new stories in that they grew significantly in each one of these movies. And I thought that's a rare talent. Like, and I'm not saying this as a point of criticism, because it's very fucking hard to do. It's very hard to do. I'm in awe of his craftsmanship at being able to do that. And it's hard to pick a favorite, but I think I am kind of slightly leaning towards 3 at the moment.
I can see that. Yeah, I think to that point, I think it is so refreshing to see an MCU character that doesn't sort of have the same arc over and over again. It is really nice. It's weird. Like the one character that kind of has like a slight reset. It's like you can kind of see in Avengers Infinity War that like Quill is a little bit of like a step back from Volume 2. And you're like, oh yeah, that's because Gunn didn't write and direct that movie.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, Adam, tell people where they can find your stuff.
Well, you can find me basically on every social media that is currently existing and probably will exist at Adam Lance Garcia. That's all one word. And you can find my first Star Wars story coming out in Star Wars from a Certain Point of View, Return of the Jedi. It's publishing August 29th in the United States and probably around the world. It's going to be a good one.
Awesome.
I'm pretty proud of it.
Okay, well, we'll have a link to the pre-order in the show notes, just like last time with when you were on for Green Hornet. So definitely check that out along with the other stuff. Adam, thanks again for coming on. I'm so glad we got to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Talked about a bunch of gun stuff, but we hadn't had you on an episode to talk about any of the Guardians related stuff. So this was so I'm glad we were able to get you on for this.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Okay, so that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website. Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And remember, you subscribe to our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get these episodes a week in advance, no ads, plus also access to the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club podcast, where once a month we talk about comic books, graphic novels, all that fun stuff. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. If you enjoy the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. On all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.